afternoon, this is Derek Chamblee, broadcasting from Chamblee, Atlanta, the next great American city, Battleground Zero, the epicenter of the 2017 civil defense of the United States of America. Beautiful day still in Chamblee, Atlanta. It's election day in Alabama for the U.S. Senate seat. It's Tuesday, August 15th, 2017, winding up on 1:30 in the afternoon, and following Trump path, the breaking news, of course, following the Tuesday election day election for the vacated U.S. Senate seat of our current Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, from U.S. Senator from Alabama. The seat currently held by appointment by Luther Strange, who has received strong endorsements by way of tweeter from our current president, Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, early this morning he released at least a couple of more tweets with his support, his great endorsement of current U.S. Senator from Alabama, Republican Luther Strange, from the great state of Alabama. And he is the nine candidates in the race. One of the articles said there's only three that really matter. He's being treated as the incumbent. Luther Strange is versus the former Chief Justice of Alabama, twice removed, Roy Moore. And we mentioned before nicknaming him Moses Moore because of his stand on posting a granite slab containing inscriptions from the Declaration of Independence, and mainly the 10 Commandments that former Chief Justice of Alabama, twice removed, Roy Moore, because of that particular stand, and ethics questions and whatnot, twice removed from Chief Justice. His stand on the 10 Commandments as the foundation of law, that is the basis of law and the Constitution in the United States of America. But we're also examining the difference between the Alabama state constitution and the Constitution of the United States, and how it is that under the Alabama state constitution that both current Attorney General Jeff Sessions swore an oath to, and former Chief Justice Roy Moore swore an oath to uphold. The difference that really elevates the Alabama Constitution over the United States Constitution is that it leaves the particular interpretation of judges and other court officials and essentially government officials and whatnot in the state of Alabama. It leaves their particular decisions under the spirit of the law, not just the letter of the law, to interpret the particulars as a regards to the United States Constitution and even the Alabama Constitution. And that has led historically in the state of Alabama and other southern states connected with the so-called slave power, it has led to decisions based on the particular religious beliefs of a particular segment of Christianity that interprets the will of God, the manifest destiny, the will of God of the American people when they came and settled the Americas and formulated the foundation, the founding, particular founding fathers' philosophy or whatnot, when they formed the United States of America, that it was formed for the white man, for the prosperity of the white man. We referred to a speech by former U.S. Senator of Illinois, Stephen Douglas, in the series of 1858 Great Debate with Abraham Lincoln for the U.S. Senate seat from Illinois. We refer to passages in his speech in regard to that, and the same has been true historically in the great state of Alabama, that the law has been interpreted that in essence slavery was permitted in the state of Alabama because of the particular beliefs, religious beliefs, that it was the will and the spirit of the law and the spirit of the Most High God that the particulars, in essence, the white man be assigned as judge, ruler, jury, voter, legitimate U.S. citizen, property holder, and that would extend to deciding what would be done with particulars regarding the slaves. That according to God, they were placed under the white man, and that extended also to women not being able to vote and whatnot. At any rate, we're also following a particular's comments from a columnist, George Will, and this is Alabama Justice. It is Triumph of George Will, and we're going to be focusing on the life of an individual, George Will, columnist, among other things, for the Washington Post, and he's accredited in Wikipedia as being one of the greatest journalists of our modern time. And he's carried on media outlets such as Fox, a media outlet and whatnot, and he's issued some sort of, we'll get to the article where he labels the Alabama Justice, or he labels the Alabama political situation as some sort of Southern Gothic, which would go back to the Goths in Europe. Gothic should be essentially the Germans, the Norwegians, perhaps even the Poles, and whatnot. And at any rate, this is the underlying theme also of the neo-Nazi movement and the so-called white supremacist movement, and the clashes, of course, in Charlottesville, Virginia, over the weekend. And very interesting to trace the particular political and media types of views from George Will over the years, that first came up basically as a 1964 Goldwater Republican. By 1968, the Republican Party was expanding to recapture the South through Richard Nixon's, former President Nixon's Southern strategy, but standing in the doorway was the governor of the great state of Alabama, George Wallace, who was also running for president in 1968, and a third party, and actually captured electoral votes, took them away from Democratic candidate Vice President Hubert Humphrey, and also Republican candidate Richard Nixon. And by 1972, however, Richard Nixon was reelected with a landslide and took all the states that were taken in the 1968 Electoral College by former governor of Alabama, George Wallace. However, in 1972, sometime around May, something like that, George Wallace survived an assassination attempt and ultimately dropped out of the race for the Democratic nomination, left the Democratic Party, and ran as an American Independent Party candidate. But he did not take in the Electoral College any states. We're going to follow, it's interesting, George Will and his political ideological shifts over the years. In 2016, he left the Republican Party. He said it was in reaction to Donald Trump, candidate Donald Trump. So sometime in June of 2016, when Donald Trump became the presumptive nominee, George Will left the Republican Party, even quoted Ronald Reagan. And former President Ronald Reagan, George Will supported his campaign in 1980. Former President Ronald Reagan, as governor of California, Republican, in 1968 was also running for the Republican nomination against Richard Nixon in 1968. And the background on Ronald Reagan was he was a Democrat that in 1960 headed the Democrats for Nixon National Committee. Ronald Reagan switched parties, and by 1966, won the election in California as a Republican governor of California. It'll be very interesting to follow George Will's take on Governor Ronald Reagan and his suppression of the protests coming out of places like Berkeley in California, his suppression of the Black Panther leadership and movement out of California. It'll be very interesting following George Will's take on, and George Will is from Illinois, George Will's take on 1968, when he was approximately 27 years old. George Will, the columnist, and in 1968 in the Electoral College, Richard Nixon took the state of Illinois' 26 electoral votes. And it's interesting also, 1968, the Democratic Convention in Chicago, disrupted by violence and whatnot. Also, very interesting, 1924, Democratic National Convention, that Democratic candidate for president 3 times, William Jennings Bryan, did not condemn the KKK in the platform of the Democrats. He did not condemn the KKK, and in the 1924 presidential election, Republican Calvin Coolidge rose to power, and shortly thereafter, at any rate, during that time, it was his re-election, he signed the 1924 Immigration Act, which greatly restricted the number of immigrants from Africa and Asia in the United States of America. And so we're following Election Day, the great state of Alabama. Oh my, it's Moses Moore versus Luther Strange Trump. Oh my, and we expect them to finish 1 and 2 and go to the September 26th runoff. This is Derek Chamblee, broadcasting from Chamblee, Atlanta. Beautiful day still here, winding up on 1:30 in the afternoon. It's Election Day, Tuesday, August 15th, 2017. CYRADYO, Cyber Citizen Network. Thank you very much.